then maybe you could face the same, and that is why the Colombian representative is speaking out in such strong terms. Let's focus, just in the interim, we're waiting for Russia and China to speak, but let's focus in the interim on the oil. We can speak to Homayoun Falakshahi. He's head of oil analysis at Kpler Oil. Thank you very much for being with us. Who owns the oil in Venezuela?
Hi, good afternoon. So it's the state-owned company. It's PDVSA. You have foreign companies present in the country as well, but via legal means. So there's a legal contract binding such foreign companies. For example, Chevron, the US company, is still present in the country. You still have Chinese companies as well, and also Russian companies present in the country. In the past, you used to have a lot of other oil companies, foreign oil companies from Europe and from the US, but most of them exited in the past years, or 20 years ago when most of the assets were nationalized by Hugo Chávez.
Right, but I would presume that the oil that is in the ground in Venezuela belongs to the state ultimately. The reason I ask is because Donald Trump keeps saying that it's been stolen from the United States. How would you look at that as someone who works in the oil business?
I think this he probably makes a reference to the nationalization of the assets that took place again about 2 decades ago, because back then you had companies like ConocoPhillips and Exxon Mobil also present in the country, and they have had to leave, and that means that in the past they still are owed debt from the Venezuelan government. So probably he's referring to that.
I'm not presuming that Kpler would be invited into the country to restart oil production, but if you were, what concerns might you have?
I think as an oil company, usually when you look at investing in a certain country, you're looking at different aspects. The first one is very important, is political stability, even though some companies are, I would say, more risk averse than others. Second, you need to have the reserves, and here we're talking about the country with the largest oil reserves in the ground, even though they're relatively costly. We're not talking about Saudi Arabia or Iran or Iraq, where it costs about $10 per barrel to bring oil out of the ground. Here, it's probably more around $50 per barrel, maybe even more. So there's the reserves. And the third point is the fiscal terms. It's fiscally the legal contract that you're able to sign, and how much of the profit goes back to you versus how much goes back to the state. There are examples of countries where you have a lot of reserves, but companies are just not going in there or try to exit, such as Iraq, because the fiscal terms are not great.
Just very quickly, we're about to go to the Russian representative, but it's heavy oil, it's extra heavy crude oil. Why is that important to these big nations?
Because historically, most of the refineries built, especially in the US Gulf Coast, were built and designed to process Venezuelan crude and also crude from the Middle East, which is also medium, heavy, and sour, so relatively comparable. So it's the perfect fit for US Gulf Coast refiners, but also for some of the Asian refiners, such as China. China was the largest buyer. But the oil going to China has not been going there since 10th of December.
Homayoun, thank you very much indeed for that. That tells you why Russia and China have such a deep interest in what is happening in Venezuela. Let's listen in to the Russian representative.